And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chris at Speaker's Corner. Today, I have a particularly awesome and interesting live topic to go through regarding the Quran and some of the other sources that happen to have influenced the Quran in some really interesting ways. Now, first of all, let me introduce you, Chris. You're Chris. I have cheekily called you Chris number 2. In the past. I should have named my name Chris number 1, actually. That would have been a good thing, wouldn't it? But anyway, yes.
You can still do that now if you want.
I could actually. I totally could. You know what? I'll do it in the background when I'm not in the swing of things.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I know Chris from his work, particularly on the Talmud and the relationship the Talmud has with the Quran and the other Islamic sources. Me and Chris were both part of David Wood's Islamic Dilemma group, the sort of Discord chat that David put together. Ooh, how long ago was it now? It was
March 25 is whenever it started.
And then 25.
I fully took over the project in April because David immediately dropped it. So I
that sounds like David's
project.
David Wood says he'll do something. He starts it off and then he gets sidetracked by another thing. But that's David, and yes, and we all kind of expected that. But what was amazing was people like you and others who just dedicated so much time to all these different aspects, all these different branches of the Islamic dilemma. And there's so much that we discovered there. And you know, I'm actually really proud of what this team did, because I don't know if that's ever been done before to that kind of level. Now, obviously, I went in my direction. I made ultimately the Islamic Dilemma book. Wait, I totally need to self-promote now. Oh, no. Where's the copy of the book? Wait. The Islamic Dilemma book, ladies and gentlemen. So for anyone who does not know what the Islamic Dilemma is, the Islamic Dilemma is an argument that demonstrates why Islam, the religion, is fundamentally false and contains either errors or contradictions or some unacceptable theology that as a Muslim you can't hold to without basically leaving Islam. And the argument is very simple. It's the premise that the Quran agrees with the previous scriptures, the Torah and the Gospel in particular. Not only does it agree with them, it says they're from Allah. Allah sent them to the prophets. They are present in the 7th century in a reliable and preserved form. They are authoritative as truth statements. In other words, you can read the Gospel and Torah, and what it says is true, which is profound because the Quran then goes on to contradict the very truth statements found in the Gospel and Torah that it just affirmed. So it affirms what it also denies. It seems as if the Quran author has made an error. He confirmed something without knowing what's actually there. Or maybe he just didn't care, like maybe he was deceiving people. There are different ways of looking at it, but it looks like the Quran author made a big error. Hence, this is not from God. Hence, it's actually from man. It's man-made. So there's a quick sort of intro to the argument. I went down kind of the David Wood style way of doing it, which is what I was familiar with. And I did a sort of big research dive into that. And I know you took a very interesting path, Chris, because me and you were talking a long while ago, and you were saying, hang on a second. Not only is the Quran, you know, it's getting a lot of content clearly from the Torah and from the Gospel accounts, but the Talmud is here as well. The rabbinic Jewish element plays a massive role in the influence on the Quran and the other Islamic sources. Now, I immediately thought, oh gosh, this is huge. Like this is in and of itself a massive topic that if I took that on, I would still be writing the book, and I would still be writing it for like years and years from now. I don't have the time and the patience for that. So I thought, you know what, although this is ridiculously juicy and good and a whole new interesting way to approach this argument, I thought, you know what, you could specialize in this, Chris, and because you're the guy for the job. You're the guy for the job. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? You're the man for that particular task. And I think your research, and I've been watching some of your YouTube videos, what you've done has been amazing and is incredibly important. And I want to share that with my audience today. So without further ado, I am going to hope my computer does not self-destruct, ladies and gentlemen, because I've been having technical issues, which is why we're a little bit late, but we should all be good now. I will hand over to Chris and let him walk us through this whole Talmudic issue, that's a funny term, and how that relates to the Quran. So take it away, Chris, number 2. And yes. I will also add your screen to the stage. There we go. And maybe I can do this. Is that good? How does that look?
You'll cover the text a little bit for a couple of the slides, but
it depends.
Should be fun.
Yeah,
we'll see when we get there.
Okay, we'll see. If you notice it looks weird, let me know.
Okay. So I've done this presentation with a number of people, and I try to, whenever I stream with someone, I try to customize it because the full presentation is way too long. So I pick and choose what I want to show for each audience. So this is currently the Chris's edition. Notice the plural there. The Chris's edition to the Talmudic Dilemma. Yes. So I've done this stream with Bob as well, and the Bob stream was a lot of fun because he was also having technical issues, and his computer fully crashed. So for a good 30 minutes of the stream, he was an audience member watching his own stream. And he said that I'm the only person to have ever solo hosted his stream for him other than him. So I hold the title of the only other person on Bob the Builder or Speaker's Corner, his stream host. So
that's amazing. Let's pray that doesn't happen to me today.
It was really funny. So we have the Islamic Dilemma project. We were going through it, and I had all these highlighters that I was like coloring my book with. So I have this full bag of highlighters of various colors, and I was like, hey, I will highlight things. So like pink is whenever Allah does something evil or stupid. So I have all these colors.
And you just open to a page and like half of it is pink. Okay.
Yeah. And then the other half is blue. Blue is interesting because blue is something where it doesn't line up with the previous sources. So if I go to like Surah Yusuf, for example, it's all just blue with a little bit of stupid. And I was like, okay. I had gone to like Surah 27. Here's like the opening Taha, for example, Surah 20. So it's like I'm just opening up, and there's just like I went through 2.5 blue markers. And so much of it was blue, and I was just like, oh, here's another like random, like just alpha cron. So like you get a good mix of contradiction, error, stupid, and a little bit of the Islamic dilemma. Yeah. So I did that for the Quran, and we went through, and that was part of the Islamic Dilemma project, and we actually are turning that into a website now with all of our notes on the Quran. So it's not just going to be the Islamic Dilemma. It's not going to be just the Talmudic Dilemma. It's going to be all of the problems of the Quran, both in English and the Arabic problems too. We're going to have all of that in a website, hopefully next year. But there's some books written on the grammatical errors and linguistic errors of the Arabic of the Quran. So we're going to go through and demonstrate that the Quran's Arabic is actually kind of poor. It's like middle school to high school level Arabic, which is why one of the primary critiques of Arabs who are critiquing the Quran in history, like Al-Razi, for example, calls the Arabic stupid of the Quran. So we're going to go through, we're going to add a lot of that stuff to this website. We're going to give that out to the people. So that is the back. That's how I got into it. I read Surah 27 and then read Targum Shina and realized, oh, that's the exact same story. And that was in late July. And then by October, I had already formulated and gone around 130 different parallels between the Quran and previous sources, mostly Jewish. And then I went on stream with David, and this whole thing's 130. That's not just like passages, that's ideas. So like Jannah is an idea. And that's like a full 13% of the Quran is that one idea. So it's not like it's thousands of verses, which we'll go through in a little bit, but this is now becoming a book. I did my first stream on this with David back in October 2025. I've since done like 5 streams with him on it, and a variety of others. I was waiting to do the Islamic version of it, so the Islamic Dilemma version of it with you, since you were the one that actually wrote the book. So you're getting new content that's never been presented before.
Nice. So I've taken us off the screen, by the way, so everyone can see the QR codes here. If you want to link to Defending a Lion, there is a QR code there straight to his channel, and also to the document itself.
So this is the notes for my book. It's around 400 pages, and it includes most of the parallels I found in table form. So it'll have Islamic sources on one side and then the other sources on the other side. And I have around like 170 of the sources there. So if you want to go through all of the beliefs, like the 5 pillars are all stolen, all of the reviews of Jannah and Jahannam, those are all stolen. Most of the stuff with the prophets is stolen. Just those 3 things alone makes up around 58% of the Quran. So you're talking about the vast majority of the Quran is stolen in just a couple topics, and then all the other topics bring it up to about 70% of the Quran is either directly stealing or is influenced by previous human-made sources. So, you gonna say something?
Yeah. So, I was kind of like, I was like, I want to say, and then just thought, oh, maybe I'll wait. No. So yeah, I have a habit of using the politically correct term, which is to say that something is influenced by something else.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people just don't. They just skip and they just go, no, it's just copying, and they go there.
right.
I'm fine. I'm fine either way. But I think if you're
Yes.
influenced by something, you are in some way, engaging with
Deriving
material,
from it.
right?
Yeah.
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 So it's just a
Yeah.
weird distinction. But anyway, I'll put us back up on the screen. Actually, hopefully,
Yeah.
we're all good now. And I'll put the chat up.
So I would definitely say a few things are strictly copy, then most of the other stuff is influence.
Right.
The tafsir is straight copying because it actually quotes it word for word from the Talmud in a variety of places.
Is it
So
aware
some
it's
of
doing
it's like
that? Or is it like,
yes, I believe so.
oh,
I believe
oh,
so.
wow.
So that's gets into the Israeliyat problem. So this is actually part of the theology of Islam is Israeliyat. So the stories of the Jews is literally what that means, or the ayah of the Jews. And what the hadith, because this is in hadith, it's in sunnah, just in general, and tafsir, it's in the sirats. Like it is very, very common. And you have like 5 dudes that are propagating it the most. So Qayyib al-Akhbar is a rabbi that converted to Islam either during the life of Muhammad or right after the life of Muhammad. There's debate on that if he was one of the ones that were teaching Muhammad the rabbinic sources. You have Salim ibn Abdul, or no, Abdullah ibn Salam. You have him, who is also another ex-rabbi who converted, who people accuse of teaching Muhammad. And then you have a few others. Mujahid ibn Abbas and Abu Huraira are all deeply influenced by these Jewish and rabbinic sources in Islamic, or not Islamic, Christian, Gnostic, Zoroastrian. They're adding all of these details to the Quran whenever they're explaining it. And in the Hadith, these details don't come from the Bible, and they don't really come from the Quran. Like there's times, I don't have it in this presentation, but whenever I did a stream with David just on the Israeliyat, and there's an entire section of the Talmud that is inserted into al-Tabari's tafsir on a single verse of the Quran. So he adds like hundreds of words of background information that perfectly lines up with the Talmud. It has no correlation whatsoever with the Quran. So he's adding all of this Talmudic background to the verse on Solomon having a lifeless body on his throne, which is in and of itself, that's copied from the Talmud. But then he adds all of the background information, including like the hoopoe bird, and like the king of the demons getting drunk because he got sealed in a chamber with wine instead of water. And then he like mocks it and then like quotes the Bible at it. And then he drinks it, ends up getting drunk. He gets bound by the chain that had the name of God on it. And then he gets brought before the before Solomon. So then he can teach him how to cut the stone of the temple without metal tools, which is a very weird rabbinic idea, but it comes from, I think it's either First Kings or Second Kings, but I think it's First Kings, where it talks about how you didn't hear the sound of the tools on the temple. The implication is that it's like so quick and how they made it, and it was, God ordaining and managing everything. But the rabbis take it as, oh no, they had this magic worm that was able to cut mountains in half. And this hoopoe bird knew where the worm was. So he had to capture the king of demons to tell him where the hoopoe was, to then find out where the worm is. And then he uses that worm to build the temple. And then the exact same thing happens in the tafsir, even though it's not in the Quran, but it's in the tafsir. They replace the worm with a diamond. That's really the only difference between the two stories. We have this massive wall of text that's quoting the Talmud with slight changes in what's happening in detail. But it's very obvious what they're doing. So you have that all over the place. It's pretty fun. But
yeah. That was a crazy story you just gave, by the way. I like how in the end the worm becomes a diamond. So that's kind of
Oh yeah, yeah, and the bird kills itself because it lost the diamond/worm. Yeah,
it's okay. Sorry. The way you said it as well, just like saying it all together, makes it sound just very comedic.
It's so stupid. It's
so you got this bird, right? And this bird, it knows where this worm is, and this worm has the power of cutting material to build a temple in a way that it doesn't require metal instruments. But the bird can't find the worm and loses the worm, so the bird kills itself in an act of deep, sadness. It's like, okay, that's a lot.
It broke its oath, so it committed seppuku. Yeah,
seppuku bird. Okay.
This is the same bird that's mentioned in Surah 27, by the way, the hoopoe. That the pious Muslim bird that speaks. That bird is the same bird in that story. So it's the fierce rooster is the rough translation from Aramaic. But it's the hoopoe. It's identified as the hoopoe. So you have it's not just like a bird, it's the same bird species. So this specific Middle Eastern species of bird is a fierce monotheistic devout follower of God.
I always knew
all the stories.
You can tell.
It's so wild. Yeah, but we can chat about that later before I get too destroyed or distracted going down all of the different rabbit holes. So let's talk about what the actual dilemma is.
Someone just put the seppuku bird. Sorry, that's awesome. Well done for that. I will go through super chats later. Do remind me. For the love of all that is good, please do remind me. But anyway, Chris, yes, over to you.
Also have al-Zut coffee. Which is
wait, what?
Strong
al-Zut coffee. Let me
al-Zuts, and then it's strong, dark, and gives you the energy of 30 men, and you're the Zut chieftain. And it's also Ethiopian coffee beans, so it's coffee from the land of the raisin heads.
For a second, I thought, like in my head, I just imagined there's like this Ethiopic company that's just like heard about the al-Zut and just thought, guys, I have a great idea for a company like surrounded by Muslims, where they're like, we're going to make al-Zut coffee, we're going to sell it, and it'll go. But
no, we're trying to figure out how to make this. So I have a friend who's a roaster, so he made this, and it was roasted on July 29th. I need to make it myself just to taste it. But yeah, we have al-Zut coffee now, so we're gonna try to get that to be available for people.
Wow,
we'll see.
2026, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. You want to bring us out to the side?
Actually, yeah, let's do that. It's better.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are my claims I'm actually making in the book? In the book itself, I go through the who, what, when, where, why of influence. So how did Muhammad get it? Where did he get it from? Why would he have chosen the Jews specifically? When did the Jews write this material? All of that. Then what is stolen? And what is stolen is currently 300 pages. So right now the book is right around 520 pages, and 300 of those is literally just cataloging the Islamic source, Jewish source, Islamic source, Jewish source, Islamic source, Jewish source. So my book is going to be very large, and I'm trying to keep it smaller, but it's going to be exhaustive. And I still am finding things, by the way. I've been doing this for over a year now, or about a year. Yeah, a little over a year. I'm still finding new things that are stolen. It's crazy. Anyway.
Wow.
So we have the author of the Quran thought the Talmud is the Torah, or at least the majority of it, because obviously he doesn't know the difference between the written and the oral. He thinks anything he hears is actually true. So it's my opinion that whenever he says Taratz, it actually means Talmud or the Mishnah, like the oral Torah, because that's how they would describe it. They would describe it as the oral Torah.
So just to jump in on that, and I kind of bring this out in the Islamic Dilemma book as well, which is that the author of the Quran, for some reason, doesn't seem to either care or know specifically what is in the canon. I actually spoke to some scholars about this who actually said this is probably, in their opinion, one of the stronger weaknesses of the Quran as a whole, which is the fact that it seems quite clear that whoever wrote this Quran did not actually know the canon. They didn't know what the rabbinical Jews considered their canon to be. They didn't know what the Christians considered their canon to be. They just knew parts and what they heard, and then sort of just bundled it all together. So you're saying when the Quran author talks about the Torah, he isn't thinking of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He's thinking of both the written Torah, but also maybe the oral Torah, but also maybe the commentary, the Talmud, reflecting on that oral and written Torah.
Yes. So the majority of the work he's pulling from is from the Gemara, from the commentary on the oral Torah. So he's not like the halakha might be coming from the oral Torah, but the stories is coming from the Aggidic. So it's coming from the illustrations and the metaphors rabbis are coming up with to justify their positions. That's what he's quoting from. That's what he's copying from, which I have a couple examples in the presentation, but he is not pulling from like a law book in a way, or from the written Torah in a way. He's pulling from what you would hear in like Sunday service or Shabbat service. He's pulling from what people talk about and discuss, the homilies, the traditions, what you would talk about around campfires. That's primarily what he's pulling from. So he doesn't even have like a very deep level knowledge of the rabbinic material and positions and debates. It seems like a dude who's been around Jews for 20, 30 years without ever becoming a Jew himself, being told this is this, this is that, and then he just believes it and repeats it.
Yeah,
which gets into the Islamic dilemma you can create from the Talmud, because the words on how he describes what's given to the Jews and what's given to the scholars and about the scholars. So it's pretty interesting. And this is going to be the primary focus of this presentation today. I'm going to go through the rest of them a bit, but the claim too is the Talmud can't be scripture from an Islamic standpoint, nor should it have wahi. Specifically wahi, that's binding revelation for communities. The Talmud can't have that because it was written by people who the Quran claims are misguided during the period of the Fatah when there is no prophet. So Talmud shouldn't be scripture, yet the Quran is copying from the Talmud endlessly. It's crazy. And it shows that the Quran is man-made as it gets, basic facts wrong, not only about like nature and reality, but also about the biblical stories. And it's because he doesn't understand the actual source text. He is taking the oral traditions as if it's the written traditions. And then almost every argument I've encountered against the Talmudic dilemma is circular. So they say, oh, well, the Quran is only affirming things that line up with itself in the Talmud, and the rest of it, it's not affirming. And it's like, okay, well, that's circular, using the Quran to justify what's true from the Talmud. That doesn't say anything true about either book. You're just, stating a truism about the Quran. Is like, hey, if the Quran says something and something agrees with it, it's true.
This is like IP's kind of favorite thing, right? It's like, look, how do you know the Quran is true? Well, we go to these other sources, we use the Quran to see what lines up with the Quran in these other sources, and then use that as evidence to prove the Quran is true. So it's like, well, you assume the Quran to begin with. And just to add as well, you mentioned there, and this is quite important to understand, the Talmudic commentaries that are being written on the oral or written Torah, they are coming from a period of time, and I think you actually said the name for that period, like that's a period where so that's between Isa, or as we know him, Jesus, and Muhammad, when there was not a prophet to come, right? Is that am I understanding that right?
Yep.
Right. So that would mean, and I think this is what you're getting at here, that would mean that there is no way that what these guys have written in this Talmud is possibly inspired or from God in any way, because there's no actual prophet that could possibly have revealed this new information in that period. So it de facto must be man-made according to the way the Muslims understand their own religion.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also have that, then they also debate, no, this is all true stuff that actually came from prophets. So then they are just appealing to the tradition of the Jews, that all this goes back to Sinai. But a lot of the stuff he's copying from actually says, no, this rabbi made it for this reason at this time. So they have like an isnad chain for these claims that end up in the Quran from the specific rabbis who invented it. So they're not claiming that it goes back to prophets, like Mount Sinai being picked up and held over the Jews. That's in the Talmud, and we know exactly which rabbi made it. It was Rabbi Dimi Barahana. So he made it in the late 200s. So that's hundreds of years before the Quran. We have the human who made it. We have why he made it, because he misunderstood the text of the passage because he wasn't a fluent Hebrew speaker. So he invented a falsehood, and then it became an illustrative point that ends up in the Talmud. And then he takes this point that's obviously false, which I'll go through why it's obviously false later, because I have a slide on it. But it's this false thing that didn't happen historically that only appears in the Quran because he's copying from rabbis, and that's part of their tradition at the time.
And just to add as
amazing.
Yeah, just to add as well, from what I understand, and I haven't looked into the Talmud. I mean, I've done some basic reading of it, but I'm not in any way super knowledgeable on it. But is the Talmud just legal or like opinions about things, and they're not necessarily all in agreement? You can have differing opinions about things, basically. Is that right?
That's the next slide. So before it gets to that slide,
am I jumping?
The last claim. The last claim I'm making is the Talmud still isn't entirely consistent with the Quran in theology. So you run into an Islamic dilemma problem within the confirmation and contradiction of the Quran and the Talmud, which is what I'm going to focus in on with this a couple slides in this presentation, which will be in the book, but I've never actually presented on the internet before. So that's a first for today. What's the Talmud? So the Talmud is made up of two parts, and there's two versions. There is the Mishnah, which is the oral Torah, and then there is the Gemara, and there's two different Gemaras. There's the Jerusalem Gemara, and then there's the Babylonian Gemara. The Gemara plus the Mishnah makes that Talmud. So there's an Israel or a Palestinian or Jerusalem Talmud. That's all the names. And then you also have the Babylonian Talmud or the Bavli. Those two Talmuds are the major versions of it. It's pretty much all of the when you talk about the Talmud, you're usually talking about the Babylon Talmud, because the Babylonian is twice the length of it. It's like 2.8 million words, and then the Israeli Talmud is only like 700,000. So it's a difference in kind of size and depth. But the reason why the Babylonian Talmud is preferred is because all of the rabbis that were influential were writing in Babylon. So you have the academies of Surah and Pambita, which were kind of pumping out all of this content and ideas, but they're not just pumping out laws, the halakha. That's more of the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud has also moral teachings, parables, and folklore that they themselves are inventing. And there's these long stretches of folklore in the Talmud for like pages at a time in the various tractates. But the Talmud itself is made up of 63 tractates, and a tractate is a concept or a category of topics. So like Sanhedrin is all the topics about the law. So if they have like case law that they're debating, that ends up in Sanhedrin. Rosh Hashanah is specifically on the festival of Rosh Hashanah. Nida is about marriage. Avodah Zarah is about idol worship. So you have each of these major tractates, and even the minor tractates, are about specific topics. And Muhammad is mostly pulling from some of the larger tractates. That doesn't mean I'm not actually claiming that he had these physical books in his possession. The tafsir authors for sure did because of how closely they quote it. But I would think that he actually got it orally. So he's not pulling, I have this tractate in my hand because this book was too expensive to make. It would be millions of dollars to make a single copy, mostly because of the scribal, like the cost of the scribe, not just the parchment. The parchment itself would have been like $100,000 in today's money, but the scribal work would have taken 2-3 years of constant effort of a day labor wages. So 6 days a week working on it. It quickly adds up to hundreds of thousands, if not low millions of dollars per copy of the Talmud, which is also why we don't have that many old copies of it. It was just way too expensive before the printing press. So this is one of the largest books in antiquity, and it is highly, highly esteemed within Jewish culture. This is the central text of rabbinic Judaism. And it was written by hundreds, if not a couple thousand authors, all over the place. It was all compiled by like 4 or 5 authors, but the number of rabbis that included their opinions on things in the Talmud is in the high hundreds, low thousands. So it's not just one person's opinion. He's copying from, many dozens of humans whenever he quotes these different ideas and topics. And it's not just like these major guys who you can say, oh, those guys had the prophetic spirit on him. Like they say this about Rabbi Eliezer. Like, oh, Rabbi Eliezer was basically a prophet. He had the divine voice. This is how we got this new text. And like, okay, well, I mean, not really true, but okay, sure, maybe. But what about this guy that just includes a single sentence in the Talmud and then the Quran copies that single sentence? Did he also have the divine voice? Like you have to, the way to justify this as a Muslim is ridiculous with how many people you have to make prophets during the period in which there's no prophetic revelation.
I also think
that's the big problem.
Yeah, I also think just to tie along with that, not only do you end up trying to basically say that all these people were prophets out of desperation to make this work, but you also have to deal with the historical evidence for the fact that we can clearly see when some views were introduced in the historical record, right? So we can see if someone adds a commentary about something and says, oh, this is said because of this, and then we look and we find that that particular idea that it was said because of this thing only came about in 500 AD, then we know it's not a real candidate for the actual revelation given to the prophet Musa, for example, right? So you end up, or even to any other prophets from other periods before that. So we can clearly see with the historical critical approach, when we look at manuscript evidence, we look at inscriptions and so on, it's just not a viable thing. The Quran is quoting from a source that cannot possibly go back to a prophet. And that's something I think is important to note as well.
It's extremely damaging, especially with the amount of stuff that's copied that's not from prophets or couldn't be from prophets historically. Because we as soon as ideas pop into the oral culture, you immediately start seeing homilies about it. So we have a bunch of Christian fathers that are writing homilies, and the homilies are sharing with Jewish folklore and traditions. So Jews and Christians are sharing folklore and traditions up until the time of Muhammad, even a bit after. So whenever a Jew comes up with something, you immediately see a Christian source either in the same century or the next century. So like Second Enoch, for example, is immediately copied by the Apocalypse of Paul. They're the same story. One's Christian, one's Jew. And then that eventually becomes the Night Journey in Muhammad. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That sounds like the whole thing in of itself. Yeah, okay. You can find the Night Journey found in other prior material. Wow.
Yeah, they also have the Four Rivers of Paradise. No,
wait.
The flying horse is not. I think that he's just like ascending with angels. But he goes through the levels and has the same prophets in the same order. You have the birds of paradise. You have the fruit of paradise. You have the couches of paradise. You have the Four Rivers of Paradise. The Houris comes from Zoroastrian belief, not from Jews. But you do have some Jews that kind of insinuate there will be sexual activity. Most Jews do not believe that. They don't hold to that view. They view it more similar to us, where they're just like in the presence of God, dwelling in his Shekinah or Shekinah. So I always get made fun of by Jews whenever I say Shekinah, even though it's the proper English pronunciation. Anyway. So one person asked, when was the Mishnah started? The Mishnah, so the oral Torah started before Jesus's time. The traditions of it started before Jesus's time. Pharisees became rabbis. So the Sadducees lost, and so did the Herodians. They all lost. The Pharisees became dominant, and now Judaism is the Pharisaic Judaism. So all the times that Jesus is making fun of the Pharisees for the things they're teaching, all that stuff ends up in the Talmud. I've done some streams going through John and showing like John's context is actually the Mishnah. So John is debating rabbinic practice found within the Talmud with Jesus. So like Jesus, like the reason why he makes, he spits on the ground, makes clay and puts it in the person's eye. There's like 6 different passages in the Talmud he's breaking. So he's breaking rabbinic tradition and law on the Sabbath by doing this thing to heal the man who's blind, and then telling him to go wash in the pool of Siloam, which was used for the festival that was coming up for purity water. So Jesus is dunking on the rabbis repeatedly all throughout the Gospels. And unless you know the Jewish sources, you're not going to know how deeply all of that goes, which that's a pretty cool study in and of itself. You can check out my streams on that on John 10 and 11. But anyway, we're not going through Christianity and how base that is. We're going through Islam and how Jewish it is. So we have the Mishnah being written from like 200 BC up until like 120 AD, 200 AD with Judah the Prince. And then commentary immediately started on that during the Amorim. So you have the Tanaim are the Mishnah authors, and then you have the Amorim are the Gemara authors. He's mostly copying from these dudes who are less authoritative than the others. So this is my actual argument in the book that I'm arguing for. This is the dilemma that I put forward. So premise one is Islam teaches that binding divine revelation is granted only through prophets, so specifically Wahi, and that no prophets were sent between Isa and Mohammad. This is the Fatwa. Islam also holds that the Jews after Isa were misguided people who corrupted revelation, followed man-made traditions, and thus were not rightly guided. The Talmud and early Midrash were written and compiled after the prophetic period and before Muhammad by rabbinic scholars during a prophetic void. So that's kind of the background. So we have the Jews are corrupted people who are making corrupted versions of their beliefs. Wahi only comes through prophets. There were no prophets during this time. And then many of the Quranic stories closely parallel rabbinic accounts that have no biblical origin, but do appear in rabbinic writings and oral tradition, oftentimes word for word. There are some sentences of the Talmud that end up in the Quran, some short sentences of the Talmud that ends up in the Quran, which is pretty funny. Then you have, if Talmudic and Midrashic materials, so like just oral tradition in general, were created by post-biblical rabbis who were not prophets themselves, then their books cannot be a source of divine revelation according to Islamic theology. Yet those same non-prophetic corrupted rabbinic sources contain narratives and teachings that appear in the Quran centuries later. So there's tension there. I came up with this dilemma. Horne, either Muhammad learned these stories from oral traditions, which the Quran itself admits, meaning the Quran contains human-derived material and is not purely divine, thus Islam is false, or Allah preserved and endorsed post-prophetic Jewish traditions from a community Islam claims was misguided. This contradicts the Quran's own theology of revelation, which would also mean that Islam is false. So, therefore, if right guidance and divine revelation, Hujj and Wahi, exist only through the prophets, then the presence of non-prophetic rabbinic material in the Quran demonstrates that its source must be human transmission, not divine revelation, or at least partially human transmission, which if any of the Quran is human transmission, it is automatically false based on its own theology. Thus, Islam is false. And the big takeaway that I want people to remember from this is it's not just that he's copying oral traditions, because they debate that this goes back to prophets. It's that the Quran is copying false, man-made, and contradictory information as if it's the word of God. So they're copying things we can prove are false, like Mount Sinai being picked up. That is a geologic claim. We can analyze the 4 mountains that might be Mount Sinai. None of them have the geologic features you would expect if a mountain was picked up and set down. And we have no evidence of it until the 200s. So no one talked about it for nearly 2,000 years until Rabbi Dimi Barhana.
Can I
to almost 2,000 years later? Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like there's no reasonable way that could actually go back to a prophet. Have you seen the Cave of the Seven Sleepers? Obviously the Quran, like, it gets his story from pre-existing material. Do you know that the Quran actually copies a variant of that tradition? So the Quran mentions a dog, right? It mentions there's 7 of them in a dog, or 6 of them in a dog. And
it doesn't know the number. He gives 5, 7, 9, 11.
Yeah, I always find that suspicious. It's like
Allah can't remember what number it was.
It's like, I know this, but I'm not telling you. It's like, okay, all right then. And then, but anyway, it mentions as a dog. So in the original Syriac sources, it's not a dog. The word used there is basically a watcher. And what happens is over time, the Christians, again, through homilies and their own sort of relaying it to the layperson, their own understanding of it changes slightly. And they don't look at it as a watcher, as in like an angel, but they see it more as, well, the 7 sleepers are kind of like sheep who are being guarded by a sheep dog like the watcher is like a sheep, because like, you know, who watches the sheep, right? Well, it's a sheepdog. So basically, we actually have, he's got like a name like Theodosius or something, but there's this guy who wrote a work in Syriac where he introduces the idea that the watcher is a dog, and he even tells us the name of the dog. And so basically this story undergoes development, right? And we can see this in the historical record. And then the Quran mentions that there's a dog. So basically the the Quran has like heard of the variant of the story where there's a dog. And then the Quran author was like, and I do know about the dog. I do know. And it's like, okay, it's not in the originals. There wasn't originally a dog, but all right. I just find that fast. So that's an example where that's not coming back from like Jewish material that is supposedly a candidate that goes back to Moses in some way or to some prophet, but rather it goes back to
Christian homily
tradition. The Orthodox Church has a sort of higher view of that particular story in particular, but nonetheless, it's not a candidate for actual scripture. But yeah, even then, the Quran still gets that wrong, and with tons of other stuff as well, like Alexander legends and whatnot. It's not just in scriptural stuff; it's in non-scriptural stuff as well.
Yeah, so I have Dhul Qarnayn in this slide deck. We might be able to get through it, depending on how long I take on some of the slides. So you have that's all in Surah 18, Surah Kaf. And Al-Kaf. You have 4 different stories in that surah. All 4 of them go back to Christian sources, not Jewish sources. So you have a Christian surah that he's pulling from, and one of the times for like Dhul Qarnayn, the dudes ask him like, "Hey, have you heard about this guy, Dhul Qarnayn or Alexander the Great?" And he's like, no. Or he's like, wallah. Oh, no, he doesn't say wallah. He says, "I will get back to you." And then it takes him 15 days to get back to them because he didn't say wallahi, so God punished him. And so then he comes back 15 days later and then reveals that part of Surah 18 to describe Dhul Qarnayn, which is just a beat for beat copy from the Alexander or the Syriac Alexander legend. Which I have in the slide deck. It's really funny. But okay, let's chug along. So we have what is actual revelation. We have wahi is specifically stuff that is revealed by Allah to humanity through various channels that he has authorized. So we have in Surah 16 and Surah 21 this idea that we sent not before you except men to whom we revealed. So prophets are specifically those who are sent with revelation, binding divine guidance to humanity to give them basically hujjah, to give them a burden of proof for judgment day so Allah can judge them. So without prophets, they don't actually have the ability to be judged in the same way. So they have to go through the test of fire. But so he's trying to give prophets to every group. And that actually comes from the Talmud itself, from Avodah Zarah 2b. The idea of that prophets are sent to all people groups in their language with the book in their language, that's from the Talmud. Fun fact. So you have, and even kind of like the test of fire, there's an augmented version of the test of fire in the Talmud, but instead of it being the fire of Jahannam that you have to willingly walk into to go into paradise, you have to instead sit under a blazing sun in a sukkah, in a tent. Because of the Feast of Tabernacles, the Jews have to sit in the tent, and sometimes it's summer. So because you weren't a Jew in your life, now you have to be a Jew for, I think it was a year. You have to sit in this tent for a year under a blazing sun. And if you can do it, you'll enter into paradise. But those who get angry, kick their sukkah, then it falls and they go into hellfire. So
okay. All right.
It's all over the place. Anyway. So you have this wahi that can be given through angels, dreams, direct revelation itself, arguably from Surah 20 with Moses and the burning bush. But you have usually some intermediary between Allah and his creation because there's a curtain that separates them. So the angels or whoever goes from the curtain to humanity, like Jibreel, and he gives out this divine knowledge and revelation to humanity. So in Surah 42, it says, "It is not fitting for any man that Allah should speak to him except by inspiration." So that is what Muslims and their theology is based on. It's based on this binding wahi that gives people the ability to be judged on Judgment Day. The problem is there's a gap. According to the Hadith, there's a gap between Jesus and Mohammed where no prophetic revelation was given. They actually even have a theology around this, the Ahil al-Fatra. So the people of the void are going to be judged only by the fire test. They don't have another option. They have to do the fire test because they didn't have this binding proof and evidence, the hujjah, for them to be judged by. They have to do the fire test. So the idea that these rabbis could create truth breaks Islamic theology heavily. So you also have, could the Talmud be revelation? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Sahih Bukhari 34-42 is the one where there is no prophet between Jesus and Muhammad. So any new truth can't come out of this time, and truth itself can only come through inspiration, revelation from Allah, because Allah guides who he wills and misguides who he wills. And he decides who gains truth and who doesn't have truth. And according to Islamic theology, truth cannot be stumbled upon. It can't be reasoned to. It's basically a miracle that Allah gives to you. There was debate about it before. You have some groups in the 1200s and 1300s that made it much more clear that truth cannot come through reason. They were arguing with the Christians and Jews about like, hey, how, can we come to revelation of knowledge through reason? They're like, oh, no. So they full-heartedly rejected that. Before that, there was debate and people were actually going into it. Then they realized, oh, Islam is false, and we're going to put the kibosh on that. No more thinking, no more study, no more scholar work. It's all just, believe because that's why. Anyway, so these accusations from the rabbis and towards the rabbis are putting the category, I guess I didn't really mention that, but the Quran is saying that the rabbis are misguided people, Surah 279, Surah 446. They're twisting the book with their words. They are not actually following the words of Allah. Allah has taught them, but they are not believing it. Therefore, the man-made material the rabbis are making should not be divinely inspired, yet the Quran quotes it, which is a big problem. And it doesn't just quote it in passing. It doesn't paraphrase it. It literally quotes it and then adds a rabbinic clause in Surah 532, which I have a slide on in a little bit. But you have a problem here. Why is the Quran pulling from these rabbinic folklore during a period of the Fatra? The problem gets even deeper whenever you look at how the rabbis understood the material that the Quran is copying from, because they don't actually believe it's true. That's a big deal. So the people that he's copying from don't believe what he's copying is true, which is why they made fun of him. Whenever he's like, oh, this is my revelation, I'm aligning up with your scripture, they laughed him out the room, or they laughed him out the city. And then he got super butthurt and then, said, hey, the Jews are the worst of all creatures and the Christians are, go subjugate them, make them into dhimmis. He got butthurt because they were making fun of him, because he is using their oral traditions and illustrations in these non-literal teachings as if it's true. Rambam even says in the introduction to Perek Helek, granted, Rambam is way after Islam and Rambam is going against much of previous rabbinic thought, but this is kind of the traditional view. The sages speak in riddles and parables. He's speaking of the Talmud. And therefore, when they say things that are impossible, they are speaking by way of metaphor and allegory. For example, you have Barbara Hannah's Tall Tales of the Sea, where there's a giant fish that is so large it looks like an island, and then some Jews get up on it and then start a fire to cook smaller fish on it, and then it freaks out because it got hot and it flips over. And then they have to flee into their boat before they get crushed by the fish flipping over. So he interprets those things as obviously that's metaphor, obviously it's allegory. That's not possible for a giant fish the size of, I think it was 9 miles wide. Like there can't be a 9-mile wide fish. So then you have a bunch of other stories of like birds that are so fat that they can't fly. And they have like literal grease dripping out of their wings and flesh because they just have so much fat on them. Because the Jews aren't following Torah. So they're not able to make it into paradise. They're supposed to eat these birds in paradise, but because the paradise has been withheld for so long because of the failure of the Jews, now the birds are just suffering being so fat, waiting to be eaten for paradise. Like, that's obviously not a literal thing. It's metaphor. It's an illustration to teach something wrong with Judaism or something about the Bible. That's what they do. They use these stories in the Babylonian Talmud to describe what's happening. And the Jews understood that. He even describes the groups. He says there are three groups. One group who understands the words of sages literally, and they are foolish and ignorant. The second group also takes them literally, but mocks them. The third group understands that the sages spoke in parables, and he considers himself part of the third group. And he describes this group as really small. So it's not the majority of rabbis at the time of Rambam that was taking it as metaphorical. A lot of them were actually taking it as literal, which it explains how Muhammad could be confused on whether this was supposed to be metaphorical or literal. And there's even debate now on what passages are metaphorical and what passages are literal. Like, there's this famous example of a hyena becoming a bat, and then it becomes a different kind of bat, then it becomes a thistle, then it becomes a thorn, and then it becomes a demon in the Talmud.
Interesting. That's a big jump.
And it's every 7 years it becomes one of those other things. So if you wanted, you could just put a hyena in a cage for 7 years and see if it becomes a bush or a bat, and then it becomes a bush. You could test that. And whenever Ash Mays was talking to me about it, he's like, yeah, the rabbi I had growing up, he's like, that's one of the passages that are considered more literal than figurative. So they have these wild kind of nonsensical stories that they do actually believe a lot of the time. And then other guys are like, no, obviously that's false, because it's not true. It's not literally true. So it's teaching a deeper truth behind it, which is the view of the Genoic period. So this is High Genoi and Shera Genoi. These are two of the most important rabbis after the period of the Talmud. Bahai says Agidic statements, so these are the folklore elements, are not like received tradition. Rather, they are what each individual expounded what came into his mind. So he's explicitly identifying the folklore as human-derived information based on what rabbis thought about a specific passage. So we do not rely on them the way we do binding tradition. Shrem says that things derived from verses called Midrash and Agada are mdana. They are conjecture, speculation, and are not relied upon unless supported by reason and scripture. So rabbis, during the time of Muhammad, mind you, interpreted the Agadic material as not the same as scripture. They are lesser, and they're likely not literal unless it can be supported by actual scripture and reason. If it doesn't line up with those, it's obviously supposed to be illustrations. So the Quran and Muhammad and the Hadith are showing detailed knowledge of these oral traditions and treat them as historically true, because the Quran is roughly an historically true book. They don't really have, like, it depends on what Muslim you talk to, but most Muslims take the Quran as literal facts of history. So Muhammad seems to be treating this as historical facts and truth, and then draws elements from these traditions and interpretations as divine revelation, which shows that Muhammad doesn't actually understand the source that he's pulling from. He doesn't understand these are coming from humans. And because he's copying this human-derived material in his book, Muhammad was a false prophet and Islam is false. So that is the big problem. It's not just that he's copying from things that could go back to prophets, that the Jews say goes back to prophets. He's copying from things that the Jews say don't go back to prophets, are false illustrations designed to make a point.
So, man, this is amazing, fascinating stuff. Let's deal with one common objection, because I can already tell you, and I've already seen this in the chat. Someone will inevitably say something like, but the Bible itself clearly does quote or paraphrase or makes reference to some other source that is not part of our canon, that isn't considered scripture. Right. So what's the difference there? What's the difference between when it happens in the Bible, like maybe Paul does it or one of the other writers does it, and what's the difference between that and what you're talking about?
Yeah, so when Jude quotes Enoch or Paul quotes the Jambra passage, so you have, well, first off, this is kind of a non sequitur. So the first objection I would point to that is showing Christianity is false is not proving Islam is true. That's a good point. You have to prove Islam is true in order for Islam to be true. You can't show everything else is false. because everything could be false. Atheism could be true, technically. So the Muslim, in responding and saying, oh, that's a whataboutism of, oh, the Bible also has this problem, therefore Christianity is false. You're not actually showing that Islam is true in that sense. You're not defending your book. You're not actually tackling the problem that you have here. You are doing a whataboutism and assuming, like, you're pretending that actually solves your own problem. It doesn't. You have to deal with this as it is. So that would be my first objection. And then the second objection is the way the Bible is written and the way the Quran is written, the theology of the revelation is very different. So we don't believe the Bible is the divine dictation of God. We believe it is human authors inspired by the Holy Spirit. And then they're using
dictation theory is kind of how I've started phrasing it.
Yes, we don't have that view. So having these type of things, like, we also acknowledge that there are all scribal errors. There are sections that are possibly lost. There are things that were added to the canon over time. But we, using textual criticism, we can identify those passages and understand what it was what. For the 3 times it happens, because it also happens with Paul quoting the Greeks, he is using these illustrations to make a point. He's not claiming that they literally happened. So for the Greek passage, he's quoting Zeus. He's quoting a prophet about, or a poet about Zeus. With, in him we have our being and we live and breathe. I said that out of order. But in him we live and breathe and have our being. That's talking about Zeus. It's applied to Jesus, to a Greek audience. So he's replacing this idea that they had with their own context and culture. He does this as well with the Temple of Artemis and the virgins in 1 Corinthians. So Paul uses the traditions that people are aware of to make a point. He's not saying that those things themselves are literally true. It's a difference in what's happening in the books. The Quran is saying that these things literally happened and are true. So it's a difference in kind for the problem. And then you have Jude equating Enoch. You could just make a case that Enoch is literally scripture, or you can make a case that what Enoch is quoting from actually is true. But again, that is you're entirely dismissing the actual problem. Is you have to defend how this can be true within Islam. You can't just show Christianity is false and therefore Islam is true. It doesn't follow.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Ultimately, because they think that Allah is the only person involved in the Quran, the only person, no human is involved in any sense, then everything that you find in the Quran must therefore be from Allah. But when we find things that obviously are not from Allah and cannot be candidates for prior revelation given to other prophets from Allah, then basically it's game over. Because all of a sudden, oh no, Allah couldn't possibly have said this. It comes from Joe Bloggs in the 4th century, who was some sort of ascetic monk, and he said this, and that doesn't go back to scripture. There's no historical record of it. It can't go back to Isa. It can't go back to Musa. So it's a human work. The Quran includes it, and that's the difference, I think. Yeah. So hope that's somewhat that helped for anyone who's perhaps thinking that.
Yeah, I'm going to have a chapter dedicated to that in my book as well.
Nice.
So I'm going to do a rebuttal section of the book. Yeah. I got a super chat on mine. I have never seen so little melanin on a live stream. God bless you.
I've never seen so little melanin. Yes. Yeah, we are white. You know what's really weird? I got these yellow lights in front of me. I'm actually a lot whiter than this. If these were like pure cool white, rather than like warm warm light, I would be like Casper the Friendly Ghost. So yeah.
I went to the Seek and Share Truth conference with David and IP last weekend, and we did mosque outreach. So we went to a bunch of mosques and handed out gospel tracts in Arabic, and preached to a couple of the Muslims that were there. And I got super sunburned, like ultra sunburned. Lobsterfied, and then
I'm a bit lobsterfied now.
Yeah, David and AP both made fun of me the rest of the weekend for that. But David asked Elle, he's like, "Why in the world do you have an albino out there preaching to Muslims in the sun? There's no clouds out today. What are you doing?"
It's not. They're not concerned that like you're not going to be on game with your arguments. They're concerned you're going to burn.
No.
Like literally.
Yeah.
Man,
Literally burn.
I remember, and Jai can tell you about this, but when I first met Jai in person, because I'd never seen what he looks like, and based on like how he sounds, I had a totally different imagination of what Jai looks like. And then I met Jai and DOC in person. DOC looked exactly like I imagined she would look like. I don't know why. Her voice and how she looks just fits like together. But
it does, yeah.
Jai, man, he answered the door, and I thought it was someone else. I thought it was like,
oh, I thought I have the wrong house.
Yeah, because we stayed at like a B&B to like meet up for a night and like formally say hi to each other. And when he opened the door, I was like, oh hello, is Jai there? And he was like, Chris, it's me. And I was like, what? Who is this guy? It was so weird. But yeah,
that's awesome.
Serious lack of melanin, but yeah. That's all good.
So this is the other thing that people usually bring up. Someone also asked how come jinn are in the Quran. That comes from Jewish folklore as well, which we probably won't get to today. But if you go read Pesachim 112a through 116b, it's all of the demonology of Islam is within the Talmud in that section. So toilet jinn, even in odd numbers, Allah hating odd or even numbers, that comes from the Talmud. All of the beliefs about how humans can interact with jinn, how jinn can procreate and have intercourse, and how they're physical yet not physical. That's all Talmudic. So like all of their ideas of jinn comes from the shaitans of the Talmud, which is the same word. Shaitans is the word for demons in the Talmud. So he gets the idea of shaitans, he gets the idea of jinn from Jewish and Zoroastrian folklore.
That's interesting because I did think this. I actually asked a scholar about this. Where the Quran gets the idea of a very sort of what's the word, sexualized heaven, Jannah, and where it gets that understanding from. Because I thought surely it's borrowed it from somewhere. Because I'm kind of at the point where like, can the Quran have that much of an original idea? Like, I feel like I don't know. I feel like it must have got, because that's pretty ballsy if you think about it. To just out of nowhere be like, oh, by the way, guys, in heaven we're all having sex all the time. It's great, Like, I feel like that's a weird kind of thing just to like put in there. So I thought he must have got it from somewhere else. But I was looking from the Christian perspective because I heard possibly there's a really loose way it could be tied to some of the writings of particular clergy that wrote about heaven in a way that's very visual and very like, oh, you eat grapes, like, and that's really good, as a way of symbolizing what it's like in heaven. And then maybe someone took that and went, grape, oh well, that sounds similar to, I don't know, but like yeah.
In the Avesta, so the Zoroastrian scriptures, it talks about how whenever pious men die, they meet a beautiful woman who leads them into paradise, who is described as a 15-year-old with swelling breast.
Right.
So I think it might be a combination of those two ideas, because the whole thing of Jannah just straight up comes from a couple Jewish sources. Second Enoch is a great source because it also has the 4 rivers of wine, milk, honey, and oil. So you have like the same rivers, you have fruit, you have the birds of paradise. The only difference in the birds of paradise is it's white birds versus green birds. I think I just make it more Islamic for the green color. But other than that, you have colored birds paradise that all flock around.
Just because you've just triggered a memory. Have you heard the idea that Islamic people who die in jihad, this is like a scholarly way of understanding this, there's a view that they go immediately to paradise as opposed to normal Islamic believers that don't when they die. And there's this idea that for some reason they become green birds. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that
the birds
like
of paradise?
Is that
Christian homilies talk about the martyrs? The martyrs become birds and dwell in paradise.
So again, that's something that comes from prior. Wow. Oh man,
Yeah.
can you imagine if you were like one of these great writers of Christian homilies, thinking that one day someone's going to come along, take all your stuff, and put it in this book, and that book is going to do, that's such a crazy
Terrible things
thought.
for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, my book is going to be going through all of it. It's extensive how much is actually copied. But so this is the other debate. I'm gonna skim the next like 12 slides so we can get, because we're already at an hour. So I'm gonna skim through a bunch of the slides. But the dating is, so these are all the books that it's primarily copying from. These are the dates that they're dated to by scholars. And then you also have within the Talmud itself, it says when it ended. So Bava Metzia 68a says that the last of the Tanaim, so the end of the Talmud, was the redactors of the Mishnah, and they were Rav Asi and Ravana were the end of the Talmud. Then you have all these other guys down below that are also saying when the Talmud ended, and you get a date range of 500, 514 AD. So roughly around 100 years before the time of Muhammad. And one of the biggest sources or biggest evidences we have of the Talmud entirely predating Islam is that there's no Islamic loanwords. There's no Arabic loanwords. There's no Arabic influence in syntax or structure. And every single Jewish writing after the time of Muhammad has Arabic loanwords, has Islamic influence, has these Arabized structures to the grammar. So very confident that the Babylonian Talmud predates Islam. Same with the Bereshit Rabbah. These are the two primary sources of the Quran that's getting so much of its information from. Then I have like Syriac Alexander as well, which I might go through later. So how did he come to know about this? This is going to be 2 chapters of my book, but basically Judaism spread all over the world after the destruction of the temple, and they took their older traditions with them. They had strongholds in Yemen, in Ethiopia. They had strongholds in Egypt. They had strongholds in most of the Mediterranean, Morocco. They had some in Europe. They had some in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. They had a bunch in Persia and Jerusalem. So there was Jewish rabbis all over the place teaching all of these beliefs. And every single place Muhammad went on trails for the caravans had Jewish centers of learning that he could have interacted with the Jews on those trails. He's trading with all these things. And so he's likely getting it orally. Then there's also debate on whether or not he was trained by rabbis to make the book. And that I have a long section on of my book, but we don't have time to go over it today. But there is some evidence. It's not super strong evidence, but there is some evidence that he was trained by humans, and some Jewish rabbis helped him make the Quran, which is also a accusation of the Quran itself. So in Surah 16:103, it says, "And we know well that what they say, only a man teaches him. The speech of him about whom they falsely hint is foreign, and this is clearly Arabic." Or this is clear Arabic. So his accusation against him being taught by a human is that he's writing in Arabic and that person doesn't speak Arabic. He likely spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, but so they accuse him of this thing, and then they say, oh, well, he's being accused of being copied from a rabbi. And then we also have him being the ear, and also him saying this is nothing other than fables of the men of old, including the second surah of the Quran, Surah 68, chronologically. This is the second or revealed surah, and already there is a accusation that he's copying sources that predate him. So we have this.
Wouldn't that mean that like the first one, when he revealed that one, they were like,
yeah,
we're pretty sure you copied that. So the next one he reveals is saying, just so you know, guys, this is totally coming from the divine source. I didn't get this from anywhere. That's sorry. That's funny.
It's really funny. Or that ayah is inserted at a later time, which again, the Quran's supposed to be perfectly clear. It's supposed to make sense and all these things. And yet the order and structure of it is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in any book ever. So either this is like super original, like the first criticism he ever got was that he's copying previous sources, or this is inserted at a later time, but why in the world would they insert it in one of the earliest surahs? Yeah. It's so silly, man. Then you also have that he's a poet. That's one of the other big accusations. So his primary audience, the first people he interacted with, thought that he was stealing from Jews and Christians. He was being trained by humans, specifically rabbis, on how to teach this stuff, and that he is only an ear that repeats all things that he hears. So this is the actual accusations of the Quran, and this gets important because of how the Quran talks about the previous scriptures, and this gets into the beginning of the Islamic Talmudic Dilemma. So Muhammad was trying to copy from the Torah. The problem is he wasn't copying the right Torah. He was copying the oral Tarats. So Surah 2, Surah 3, Surah 4, Surah 5, we have all of this confirming language. I'm sure your audience is deeply familiar with this. If you're not, go buy his book. But this is all Islamic Dilemma verses. He is copying and confirming the previous scriptures, specifically the Torahs. So,
oh, nice.
book,
oh, awesome.
Book
Thank you
good.
so much.
Yes. Get the book, read it. It's great. But we have these other accusations as well. So he's making an argument of his prophethood based on the previous scriptures. So in Surah 620, those to whom we gave the book, so this is speaking of the Jews, recognize it as they recognize their sons. Those who ruin their own souls will not believe. So he's saying that the Jews will recognize the Quran or the revelations within the Quran as if they recognize their own sons. It's so natural to them. It's so known to them based on the revelations that they already have that they should recognize it as they recognize their children's faces. We get this in Surah 2 as well. Those to whom we gave the book recognize this as they recognize their sons, but indeed a party of them knowingly conceals the truth. And in Surah 26, we have the Quran is in plain Arabic speech, and indeed it is in the scriptures of the men of old. So this idea of him copying from the men of old is exactly the same phrase, which is kind of funny. So we have a bunch of accusations in the Quran of him copying the fables of the men of old. And then he says that it's in the scriptures of the men of old, which is just really funny. Is it not a sign from them that the scholars among the children of Israel know it? So the rabbis know the information that's in the Quran. So he's confirming the Quran by being perfectly in line with the previous scriptures that the Jews and Christians had. And this creates a bit of a problem. Surah 29:48 is the primary proof text of this idea. But the Quran is giving an argument as to why we should believe Muhammad and know that he's actually a prophet. The Quran says it's in total agreement with the previous scriptures of the Jews and Christians. Surah 29:48 says, in like manner, we have revealed the book to you, and those to whom we gave the book previously will believe in it. And among those there are some who believe in it, and no one denies our signs except the unbelievers. And you were not a reader of any book before it, nor do you write it with your right hand, for then those who follow falsehood might have doubted. So this is the Ummi defense. This also comes up in Surah 7:157, where Muhammad is an Ummi. He is an unlearned person. Now, this is commonly translated as unscriptured or illiterate. This is actually a rabbinic term for Gentiles and for Jews who don't study Torah. So this is a rabbinic term he's applying to himself that basically means unlearned in scripture. So he's not a scholar, he's not a rabbi, he doesn't study, he didn't go through yeshiva. So he's in this category of ummi. And there's this idea in the Talmud that at the end times there will be ummi prophets. There will be prophets that have not done this study. They're not sages, they're not scholars. Just the random Jews will prophesy at the end times. Now, Muhammad was an end timer, he was a doomsdayer. So he may have actually believed the rabbinic idea of during the end times, prophecy will return, and it will return to people who are not are expected people, because there's also an idea that every generation has one person which whom prophecy is fit to return through, but their people are not worthy of it. And this is quoted in Surah 48 from Sota 48, Sota 48 2b, and this is Surah 48 22, if I remember correctly, but it's the passage of the Shekinah. So it's quoting from the Talmud with a passage that uses a word that is rabbinic. It's all over the place. It's really funny. But you have here this Ummi prophet. The reason why we can know that he is a prophet is because he never read the books before now. If he did read the books before then, they might have accusations against him saying you're just copying. But because he'd never read the books according to the Quran, you have to agree that he's a prophet. If his scripture perfectly lines up with the previous sources that you have with you, and he's never read them, the only way he can have that information is if Allah revealed it to him. That is the primary proof of his prophethood, according to the Quran.
Just to
This is
add
the
to this as
miracle
well.
of Islam.
Yeah. So you can find in like Surah Al-Yusuf, Surah 12, ayah 3. Pretty sure that's right. Verse 3. You can find where Muhammad. Actually, it's presented as like a conversation between Allah talking to Muhammad directly, and he says to Muhammad, "By the way, you didn't know this. You didn't know these stories that I'm about to reveal to you, but now I'm revealing these to you. You were totally ignorant of them." So it's a way of kind of saying that, you know, these are miraculous. No way could Muhammad have ever known these stories. The fact that he knows them is proof that they must have come from God. And the problem with that is that that's just not a good argument. I mean, imagine today someone tried that and says, look, guys, I didn't know about the Talmud, but now I do know about the Talmud. So obviously that must have come from God, right? Because I didn't know about it before, but God told me it. And he told me specifically, hey, Chris, I'm telling you about the Talmud. You didn't know about the Talmud before. Now I know about it, so I guess I must be a prophet. Like, no one would accept that. No. Everyone would say, no, you went on Google or you had a chat with Chris number 2 and he told you about the Talmud. Right? Like, no one would believe. You know, and if I try to say to you, yeah, but how is that possible? I can't even read or write, so how's that possible? You would say, he told you it. He literally spoke words. Can you hear English? Yes. Well, then he told you, and you memorized it, and then you repeated it. And I went, yeah, but I can't read or write. Like, no one would accept that. That would be absolutely insane.
Yeah. Oh, I misremembered. I just remembered now. It's 44 Sota 44b, paragraph 6 on sofar.org. And then the Quran is Surah 4426. Because I remember it because it's the same numbers if you put the B as 2. So it's 44b6 versus 4426. So, and then it's also 5 letters that start with an S and end in an H. So it's like Surah versus Sota. Anyway. But yeah, that's a great point. This is the miracle of Islam. This is the miracle of Muhammad because he didn't do any miracles according to the Quran. This is his miracle that he's lining up with the previous sources. The problem is he doesn't. He lines up with the oral traditions. So if the message actually corresponded to what Jews and Christians already possessed, then Muhammad's lack of Burke learning becomes the evidence of divine revelation. It is his proof of prophethood since he had no actual miracles. But it doesn't actually line up. The Quran does line up extremely well with the oral tradition. Sometimes it's indistinguishable from the oral tradition. So if Muhammad is like, hey guys, I have this revelation. It's the same as what you have. I think he's being genuine. I think he's actually trying to say, yeah, I reproduced the Torah that you guys have. And then he showed it to them and they made fun of him because like, that's not the Torah. That's the Mishnah. Or that's the Gemara. Like that's folklore. That's Agita. And then they laugh at him because he's not actually lining up with the Bible. Whenever he claims to be lining up with the Bible, he lines up with the oral traditions of not just Jews and Christians, but also Gnostics, Zoroastrians, Greeks, and Arab pagans. So he's pulling from many different sources, also Manichaeans, like many different sources he's pulling from to get all of these different beliefs and ideas. Like the Gnostics is a one that most Christians know about because he's quoting from like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, Infancy Gospel of James, the Arabic Matthew Gospel. Like you have a lot of different Gnostic sources and later Christian sources that he's pulling from for a bunch of different stories, not only about the New Testament people, but also the Old Testament people. He pulls like Surah Yusuf, for example, is a blending of Christian homily and the Talmud. So he's adding all details he's ever heard about Joseph's story, throws into Surah 12, and it's a mixture. And this is Joseph Witzman, his PhD dissertation was on the Syriac sources for the Quran, and he shows how much of Surah 12 comes from the Christians. Well, then you can also do the exact same thing for Surah 12 for the Jews in the Talmud, which I've done. So I'm going to incorporate not just the Jewish stuff that the Quran's copying from, but everything that I have found that the Quran is copying from. So Muhammad is not faithfully copying the Bible or any scripture. He is repeating the stories in his book as proof of his prophethood, but they actually show that he's a false prophet. So he's quoting oral tradition as proof of his prophethood, which ironically, inadvertently shows that he is a false prophet, which is just so beautifully ironic. It's kind of like him claiming that, oh, if I'm a false prophet, Allah will cut my aorta, and his aorta is cut, or he claims that his aorta was cut on his deathbed. Like,
yeah, it does seem a bit ironic. Before you continue, I'm just going to take this moment very quickly to go through super chats before I forget. We'll go through all of them together. Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for 50 NOK. And that's obviously Norwegian. Yes, I remember I learned this last time. Thank you very much. And we have 1,000 jewels, which just sounds hilariously awesome. 1,000 jewels, corgi. Okay, intriguing. Thank you so much. 2 jewels, silver star. Okay, I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
Jewels are a new thing YouTube added. Yeah.
What like little, what's that?
Like, they're like emojis or like stickers that show up in chat and like play animations. And we get like, I think it's like 100 jewels, like $1 or $2. So it's not a lot of money, but it's a reward program for people giving super chats. So everyone gets a free pool of jewels that they can send to YouTubers. But also if you do super chats, you can then send more jewels to people. You can also buy jewels. So it's just another monetization source for YouTube.
So it's like a in YouTube currency. That's kind of,
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right. I learn something new every day.
More impressive animations as you spend more on it.
Nice. Agent Kenny 57. Thank you so much. Islamic Dilemma undefeated. Indeed. Absolutely. 100%. And I'm willing to bank that like decades from now, it will still be undefeated. Skyscraper Philosopher 8476 says Talmudic Dilemma needs its own book. Make it happen. Yes, you should. Chris, get that done.
I need to get it done. I'm trying to get done before Christmas this year. I have a book cover already and I have a publisher. I'm just need to actually get the content done.
What I will say is what I ended up doing is I treated it like a full-time job. So I literally spent like 6 hours of my day in a library just writing the book.
Yeah.
And the annoying thing is it actually gets worse the closer you get to the end. Sadly. Yeah, you'll find that.
I'm at 500 pages and I just need to like revise it. It's just taken me twice the amount of time to get to the revision than it did to write all of it. So
yeah.
But I do have our shared Irish friend helping me with my book as well.
Good. He's the best. Man.
I do have
he's
help
the absolute
on it.
best.
He is great.
He helped me so much with like he just kept reading everything I wrote, reading it and giving me suggestions and like so grateful for that. So that's awesome stuff.
Yeah, he's doing that for me now.
Perfect. Robert the Michael says, I have never seen so little melanin. And I'm like, yes, that's the one I saw earlier. Indeed, we have addressed the issue of the melanin. Thank you so much for the super chat. Economicon, good to see you again, my friend. I hope you're doing well. Imagine if you can also show that. Oh, yeah, I saw this. I think I saw him mention this earlier. Salbuhu, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, has Talmudic origins. Our hypothesis is that Salabi means solidification, which is cementing, like the way Pharaoh cemented the firstborns in the Talmud. I don't know if that rings anything for you, but that's definitely some news to me. So that's something for me to investigate. Do you want to comment on that, Chris?
I don't have that in the book yet. No, I don't have that yet. Again, I'm still finding new things. So I have a to-do list of like 40 different topics to look into. So that'll just be added to the pile of my to-do list. Mary keeps adding to that pile as well, which is not It's great.
Please stop. There's too many things. This book is never going to get done if I have to quote every Talmud. But
I just keep expanding the book. Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to hear more about that Economicon. If you can send me a message or something to expand a bit on that, that'd be really awesome. Actually, I think you may have said before that you did a video on it. So point me in the direction of that, and I can check that out. I'm sure Chris will as well. Thank you so much. And Jonathan says, any idea where Mo would have heard the word Ahmed and why he said Jesus made a prophecy about it? That's an interesting... So actually, can I just jump in with one thing? One suggestion... You can't prove this, and it's kind of annoying because there's not enough evidence. There's not enough data in the Quran to the verses where Muhammad's name is used, because Muhammad's name is notoriously not mentioned a lot. It's like 4, maybe 5 references, depending on what you consider.
Yep.
Every other time, it's just the Quran talking to a generic person. Say you. It's like, okay, well, who's you? Who's you? But when Muhammad's name is mentioned, there's a lot of times when it contrasts suspiciously close with Isa. Like there's verses in the Quran where Muhammad's name is said there, but then there's a parallel verse that basically says the same thing in the same way about Isa, which is interesting. So some scholars have suggested that perhaps it's actually a title, Muhammad. This is a suggestion, by the way, guys. Just don't go too far with this. And you can't know this either, I don't think, but it's there. And that actually maybe his name was actually Ahmed. So what they do is they take 61.6 where it says Ahmed, and they basically say, well, that actually seems to fit better with a proper name compared to Muhammad. And given that Muhammad has these parallels and is said so little often, they suggest that maybe his actual name may have been Ahmed, but he took on the title or I don't know. What's the word again? For someone who takes on like an acronym, not an acronym. Definitely not a euphemism. I can't remember the term, but basically it's an argument that Ahmed was actually his name. But anyway, that's what I wanted to add to that because you just reminded me of it.
Yeah. We do have an early source in Islam that says that Muhammad is his name. So in the 660s, we have the Mandean Book of John, which calls Muhammad the son of Ishmael, the Arab, and the son of Abdullah's handmaid. So you have Muhammad as a name given in the 660s. So right after the time of Muhammad, it has his dad's name, and it describes them as like being these massive hypocrites. Like they forbid drinking alcohol, yet they get drunk. They forbid usury, yet impose taxes. They forbid bloodshed, yet or like warmongers. So like they have all these like hypocrisies that Muslims are doing, and then describes Arabs later on. And it actually says that Arabs hate the Jews, yet they are Jews. They hate the Jews, yet their book is from the rabbinics or like from the Torah. So it describes the Quran as a Torah ripoff, and they describe Muslims as wannabe Jews. 30 years after the time of Muhammad.
Wow, that's interesting. That is amazing. Thank you so much for your super chat. Randy Bales donated, gifted 1 defending a lion membership. Thank you so much, Randy. And likewise, you gifted 1 Crystal Speakers Corner membership. Now, I have to be honest with you. I actually turned these membership things on for the first time like a month or 2 ago or something. And that was because someone who I'm good friends with asked me to, because they don't want to use Buy Me a Coffee, because Buy Me a Coffee insists on like American dollars and they're not American, basically. So they're like, can you just turn on the YouTube thing so I can just pay you in British pounds? And I did, and I've never had a membership thing. I don't know what this is or how this works or what this does. Maybe someone can tell me, but whatever this is, thank you so much for doing it. I'm such a noob at things at times. And there's oh gosh, what's the aftertaste on the Zut coffee?
It's fruity.
Fruity, oh gosh. Better than nutty, I guess. Anyway, moving forward. All right. Okay, awesome. I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Yes.
We got about 20 more minutes. We'll see if we maybe do overtime. Take it at your leisure.
I will go fast. because I still have maybe like an hour of content, so we'll see. I've sidetracked pretty hard a couple of times.
No, that's right.
So we have in Surah 532. This also comes from Surah 530 and 31, which is Cain and Abel. That's also Talmudic. Or it's Midrashic specifically. So he's copying from the Jews for the idea of Cain burying, or the raven teaching Cain how to bury Abel. That is a rabbinic belief. So it goes from one rabbinic belief straight into this next rabbinic belief, and it uses the death of Abel as this criteria. For that reason, for the death of Abel, we decreed for the children of Israel that whoever kills a human being for anything other than manslaughter or corruption on the earth, this phrase is rabbinic, by the way, corrupting the land with bloodshed. This is a rabbinic phrase.
Yes.
It will be as if he had killed all mankind, and whoever saves the life of one person will be as if he saved the life of all mankind. And then in the next ayah, it then says, that was for the Jews, but for the Muslims, we go conquer. So people who quote this as like, oh, Islam is peaceful. This actually doesn't apply to Muslims. This is actually just for the children of Israel. But this is a decree from Allah for the children of Israel. So you would expect to find this in the Torah. You would expect to find this in some scripture. We find this in Sanhedrin. We find this in the Talmud. And therefore, Adam, the first man, was created alone to teach you that with regard to anyone who destroys one soul from the Jewish people, i.e. kills one Jew, the verse describes him blame as if he destroyed an entire world, as Adam was one person from whom the population of the entire world came forth. And conversely, anyone who sustains the one soul from the Jewish people, the verse describes him credit as if he sustained an entire world. I also have this in Avalt's the Rabbi Natan 31. So you have a loose quote. Now there are differences between the quotes. There's an insertion of this phrase. So for anything other than manslaughter or corruption on the earth, that is inserted. And then this is specifically from the Jewish people, and this is just mankind. Those are the differences, but there's only 2 times where the Quran is actually attempting to quote something. It's this, and then the passage of the Psalms that it quotes. So according to scholars, and not just my opinion, but according to scholars, this is one of the only deliberate quotes the Quran is attempting to do. And it's of the Talmud, not the Bible, the Talmud. And it says that this was decreed for the children of Israel. We know which rabbi invented this in the 200s. So we know who made this up, and yet Allah says that he made it up.
Wait, but how do you not know that actually the guy who we know originated this from, he secretly knew through some undocumented chain or some method that we don't know, he knew that this was actually originally given to the prophets, and people just forgot about it and didn't write about it up until now, and now he's writing it down in 200 AD, you said, or whatever. Yeah. How do you not know that's the case, Chris? You riddle me that.
Well, they never said that they were, and they're constantly giving these illustrations and these like exegesis of the text, and this appears to be in that category of exegesis of the text. So this is not saying that this is coming from a prophet. This is not saying that it's divine revelation. This is saying that this is our understanding of the text, understanding of why Adam was made alone. And this is just one of the ideas from this long passage of why Adam was made alone. So this is just one of the ideas that were circulating from the rabbis. There were other ideas that were not selected for the Quran. So then you run into the circular reasoning again. If you say, oh, well, this idea is true, but the other 4 that were given are not true. It's just this one out of the 5 that were true because the Quran quotes it. You're running into the problem because it's the same dude who made up both this explanation and one of the other explanations. So if it's the same rabbi coming up with these different ideas of why Adam was made alone without like Adam and Eve or like hundreds or thousands of people, why was Adam made alone? He comes up with multiple explanations, and the Quran is only selecting one of those explanations. Why? Because this became the dominant view. This became common folklore. This became common, belief within Judaism. The other ones didn't, not nearly to the same extent. So he appears to be copying the popular stuff, but not the unpopular stuff. And he's selectively quoting from rabbis. So he's saying that, oh, well, this rabbi only comes from prophetic sources. well, why is the other things that Rabbi said not also in the Quran? And it's only just a few things that he said.
I see. Yeah, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good. It's interesting.
Yeah. Then you also have this in the same book or the same surah. So in Surah 5, Ayah 44, indeed, we revealed the Taurats containing guidance and light by which the prophets who submitted themselves to Allah made judgments for Jews. So too did the rabbis and scholars judge according to Allah's book, with which they were entrusted and of which they were made keepers. So the rabbis and scholars are the keepers and the guardians of the book of Allah, which is a very interesting phrase. Now, again, this is the end of the Quran. This is one of the last surahs of the Quran, last 3. And yet the Quran is asserting that the rabbis are judges over the Jews. The rabbis have authority over the Jews. The rabbis are the keepers of the book of Allah, specifically the Torah. What Torah did the rabbis have? What Torah did the rabbis talk about? And I have a whole chapter dedicated to the rabbinic view of the Torah. The Torah includes everything. All oral tradition, all Midrash, the Mishnah, the Gemara, things that like the practices of the prophets or the sages themselves, the rabbis themselves. Like there's this famous story of one of the rabbis following another one into the bathroom to watch how his rabbi pooped. And then after that, he follows him into his bedroom, hides under the bed, and then listens to and tries to like peep at him having intercourse with his wife to figure out what's the sunnah of how to do it with my wife. And then the rabbi starts doing dirty talk. And then he's like, oh, far be it from you to say such things in bed. And he's like, is that you under there? What are you doing?
Wait, he said that out loud. He didn't think that.
He said it out loud. Yeah, he said it out loud. He's like, how dare you say such dirty talk? He's like, what are you doing? Get out of my bed.
First, I find out Rabbi, that you poop. Now I find out that you have intercourse and you do all these dirty things. Oh.
This is my favorite part. He said, but Rabbi, it's Torah and I must learn. So his reasoning onto why he peeped him in the toilet and why he peeped him in the bed was because it's Torah. And he has to learn Torah. He's a rabbi. He has to learn Torah. So the actions of the rabbis are Torah themselves. They have a sunnah of the rabbis that they must follow, like Muhammad in the Hadith.
Man, I was wondering if you were going to go like into the whole 3 stones thing.
They have that. That's in Disclaim 113a. Yeah.
So it does go into that. So whoa.
It's rabbinic.
It's rabbinic.
You can't wipe with an even number because even numbers are bad. That's the number of demons. The king of demons, Ashmedai, is the ruler of evens.
That sounds like such a
I'm not joking.
Thing.
They have bathroom
I am
gym.
the demon,
bathroom
the
gym
ruler
are
of
really fun. They have whenever you go to a bathroom, you have to be very discreet. You have to be very quiet, and you have to be modest. So you can only pull down your pants
because there might be
enough.
this random guy watching you if you're not careful. But yeah.
Well, the word more about the jinn, but they have the shaitans. They have bathroom shaitans, and you can only pull it down enough to poop or pee, and then you have to sit to poop and pee, in order to be modest. And then there was one rabbi who was very scared of them as a boy, so he had a goat that he would go into the bathroom with because the goat would keep the demons away. And then there was at one point his wife would they cut a window into the bathroom, and then his wife would rub his head while he's pooping and then shake a can with a rock in it to make a bunch of noise to keep the demons away because demons don't like loud noises. So she would shake a can and then like pet him and comfort him while he's taking a dump in order to keep the demons out because demons like shadows and they like dirty places.
And there's just some guy like hiding in the corner with a pen and paper being like, step 1, get goat, get wife to help.
The Talmud is a lot of fun sometimes, man.
You know, I'm sure like somehow back in that time and then the way it's written, you know, it's not as comical, but when we look at it today, there's so much.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Okay. So let's get into the Islamic Dilemma stuff because we haven't even made it to there yet. So Sahih Bukhari 3461 has the Prophet Baha said, "Convey my teachings to the people, even if it was a single sentence, and tell others the stories of the Bani Israel, which I have been taught to you. For it is not sinful to do so, and whoever tells a lie on me intentionally will surely take his place in the hellfire." So now you are ordered to teach the stories of the Jews. In Sunan Abi Dawud, which is Sahih, both of these are Sahih, the Prophet Baha said, "Relate traditions from the children of Israel, there is no harm." And then in the next hadith, the Prophet used to relate us traditions from the children of Israel until morning came. He would not get up except for obligatory prayer. So in a Sahih hadith, apparently Muhammad would just sit around with the Sahaba and his wives and teach Jewish oral traditions for hours on end. So people are like, well, how would Muhammad know all this stuff?
Huh.
May I interest you in reading your hadith and your sources?
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, there are stuff in like Sahih Bukhari and other hadith where it says the people of scripture used to recite the Torah in Hebrew, and they used to explain in Arabic to the Muslims. On that, Allah's messenger Baha said, "Do not believe the people of the scriptures or disbelieve them, but say we believe in Allah and what was revealed to us." So you can't just blindly believe the Jews. You can only believe the Jews if it agrees with the Quran. So he actually has circular argument, like Muhammad gave circular reasoning when you believe the Jews versus when you don't believe the Jews, and it's if it agrees with him.
Nice. That, you know, that ties up so like neatly. Just agree with everything that he says, and matches up with him, and disagree with everything that doesn't match up with him.
Yes. So now we're in part 2 out of 4. So part 1 was only supposed to take 15 minutes, and we're at an hour and 40. But we'll quickly go through this. The Quran agrees with the Talmud. We have that the Quran. So this is actually like content from the book itself. I was too lazy, so I just typed in the paragraphs from the book. So the Quran says it confirms the Torah over and over again, yet it only lines up with the rabbinic tradition. It even says that Allah ordained things for the children of Israel in rhetoric that sounds like oral tradition. If Allah ordained things taught in oral tradition and uses it in his book, does that mean the book or oral traditions is authoritative and preserved from prophetic statements? So if Allah is quoting these sources, does that make the sources themselves authoritative or preserved from prophets? If Muslims affirm that yes, it is, and they try to avoid the Talmudic dilemma by saying, oh, all of that material just goes back to prophets, they're actually ending up in an Islamic dilemma because the sources that they're saying are preserved and authoritative that have the words of Allah in them don't agree with the Quran and all of its theology. It mostly agrees with it significantly better than the Bible, but doesn't fully agree with it. So if Muslims affirm that the Talmud and oral traditions are authoritative and preserved in order to avoid this problem, then there becomes an Islamic dilemma style problem because the Talmud doesn't fully agree. I have 2 examples to go through, but there's more than this.
So I've got to jump in so quickly. Actually, like Daniel Pikachu, he actually said to me in a response to one of my videos, the Talmud is actually from Allah. He actually said that. But the way that they do it is hilarious, right? Because the way that they do it is, first of all, that is a hilarious statement for him to say. But also he just says, but some of it's corrupted. So and given like this kind of like way of thinking, you could say anything's from God, right? You could say like, I don't know, a newspaper's from God. It's just that, the newspaper was corrupted. And that can explain any like contradictions of the Quran, because you just have that built-in caveat. So you could really say anything. Like you could be inspired, Chris, and it just turns out that, I don't know, everything you've written has been corrupted. Your YouTube channel has been corrupted. This live stream has been corrupted. We're actually fully in line with the Quran.
Yes.
You just don't know it because this has been corrupted. Yeah. It's a really bizarre way of thinking about it. Yeah. That's so crazy.
Yeah. And then, so to answer Daniel, you could give these 2 examples, because these 2 examples show that the Quran cannot agree with the Talmud. So the oven of Ankhem, or Aknai, is one of the most important examples to pull up. So it basically is a story of Rabbi Eliezer saying, hey, an oven needs to have like 6 divisions instead of like 4 divisions or however the other. And the other group of rabbis like, oh, no. Of course it has to be 4. And then he's like, what are you talking about? No, it has to be 6. So then he appeals to miracles. So he says, if my ruling is right, let this carob tree be uprooted and throw itself 9 miles away. And the carob tree all at once is picked up and thrown really far away. And they're like, that doesn't prove anything. So then he's okay, if my ruling is right, the stream will run backwards. It'll stop its flow and go in the opposite direction. And immediately it does. And then he's like, they're like, oh, that doesn't prove anything either. He's like, okay, if I am right, the study hall we're in will cave in and kill all of you. And they're like, then one of the other rabbis, which was one of the big rabbis, he says, no. And then it stops because the study hall had so much reverence to the sages that it didn't want to fully collapse and it didn't want to fully sit upright. So it started leaning because it didn't want to take sides. So this inanimate building decided to lean inward to pay homage to both rabbis. And then okay. Rabbi Elazar eventually, he goes up to the mountain and he declares, if my ruling is right, there will be a heavenly voice that declares I am right. And then God speaks out of the heaven, says, Rabbi Elazar is right. All of you guys are wrong. And then Rabbi Yeshua, which is the big guy who was debating, he stands up and says, it is not in heaven, speaking of the Torah. So this is one of the most common rabbinic phrases of HaTorah Lobim Shemaim. Like the Torah is not in heaven. It was given to the rabbis. Now it's the rabbis' possession. It's the rabbis' responsibility to interpret it. And the way that they interpret it is by majority vote. So whatever the majority of rabbis agree on, that becomes the truth. So that is very different than prophetic revelation from Allah. That is not something that could be agreed upon, especially because God spoke and said, this dude is right. And then his response was, the Torah is not in heaven. And now it's 3-2. We still have the majority. And then God laughs later on. Like they ask Prophet Elijah, what was God's response whenever this happened? And he said that God laughed and said, haha, my children have defeated me this day. So that's not Allah at all. That is an entirely different view of authority and how you interpret scripture and how you arrive at truth. In the rabbinic sense, even if a voice of God issues something, you ignore it. You go with the majority vote. And this goes exactly against Surah 33, which says that if Allah decrees something and his messenger decrees something, then it is so. You can't debate it. Here you had basically God and his messenger saying something and the rabbis still debated it. And then the majority view actually became the halakha. So obviously that can't line up with the Quran. You also have the prophethood belief. So in Sanhedrin 11a, it says that prophecy ended with Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So prophecy ended before the time of Jesus. And then a lesser spirit remained with the people, a divine voice, but it wasn't straight prophecy through the Holy Spirit. It was a lesser form that the sages used to receive new information for the Talmud. But their authority specifically was not the same level as prophets. It's not prophetic in nature. It was interpretive understanding. It was the majority voting again. So they say prophecy ended. This is a problem for Islam because they say that Jesus and Mohammad are prophets. So you have a contradiction there, but also prophecy being given to sages with the divine voice, they actually consider the sages' version of it greater than the prophets because they had wisdom and law and debate. So because they're reasoning about it, they considered it a higher form of understanding than direct prophecy, which is just straight up not allowable within the Islamic framework. So you have this kind of contradiction. You have this kind of dilemma where you have Muslims need the Talmud to be the word of Allah. Otherwise, Allah is copying from humans. But if you say the Talmud is the word of Allah, you have theology that contradicts the Quran. So what do? You can say the Talmud is merely human tradition, but then all of these parallels, there's hundreds, thousands of them, they show the Quran is false. They show it's man-made material. You can say the Talmud contains some fragments of truth from the prophets, but also mixed with corruption. But then you need an actual standard, you need an actual test to show what is true, what's from God, what's from a prophet, and what's not true and what's not from God, what's not from a prophet. If you just say the Quran, whatever agrees with the Quran is true and whatever contradicts with the Quran is false, that's circular reasoning, it doesn't work. Then you're just using the Quran as a filter to find the things that agree with it. That's not actually true. You can't use that to justify your belief. So the Talmud cannot be blanket confirmed as revelation from Allah because it contains all these contradiction. Because again, it's a book of debate. So you have rabbi like so-and-so says X, rabbi so-and-so says Y, and they're contradictory. So, the Quran says if it's from Allah, you won't find a bunch of contradictions in it. The Talmud is just a book of contradictions. It's a book of opinions and beliefs that somehow a bulk of it ends up in the Quran as the source text for this final revelation from Allah to humanity. So that's kind of the problem. That's my Islamic dilemma version of this.
Nice.
Which is a minor section of the book. But
I think this is really good. I think this is spot on. I mean, yeah, there's just the fact that the Quran is so deeply embedded with the Talmud, with these other traditions, that it just can't separate from. And the fact that we have people like Daniel Akikuchu and others who just bite the bullet and say, yeah, the Quran is confirming the Talmud. The Talmud is actually from Allah, is insane.
You kind of have to.
You kind of have to, yeah. But again, they have to use this cop out of, but it's corrupted in some ways, but not other ways. And the Quran never tells you that these things are corrupted. The Quran has no idea that these things are like, bad things have happened, but good things. It's just a foreign idea. The Quran seems to have a very high view of the previous scriptures. And I think it's quite clear that the Quran author, I don't think, is able to distinguish between the written Torah, the oral Torah, the Talmud. He can't distinguish between these. And I can't think of any reason to think he's able to do that. It seems as if he just thinks it's all. I mean, again, remember, was it Solomon? Gideon and Saul. Sorry.
Gideon and Saul mix up.
Totally mixed up. There's so many reasons to think that he just doesn't quite know what he's getting. he's got like, he knows a lot, but there's just big parts of it that he's just misunderstood in significant ways, which of course makes sense if you've lived with a Jewish community for large portions of your life, like you were saying earlier, 20, 30 years, but you never were actually a Jewish person. Like you never actually followed the faith. So you know a lot because you've hung out with these people, but that knowledge goes to a limit, right? Like you're gonna miss. It's a bit like when someone doesn't go to, I don't know, university. Like they may know a lot of things, but there are certain like gaps in their knowledge that a university would have that would have made like important. They would have said, actually, this is a core part of it. Whereas for you, because you didn't go to university, you might have thought, well, I didn't actually think it was that important at the time, So there were kind of like gaps in knowledge there. But yeah, this is just crazy stuff. You know what? I'm actually thinking maybe we should make this a 2-part thing. If you have, was it another 2 parts to go? How many sections left?
Yeah. So this is part 3, and I can make this as long as I want. I was just going to go through that much. So another 15 slides, and we could go through it quickly if you want. I could do it in like 20 minutes. So I guess it's up to you if you want to just try to wrap this up and.
I'm thinking maybe split it out into a second part, because I think although it's only 15 slides. 15 slides is a lot, by the way. Like, I mean, I guess it depends like how much you talk, but like you have a lot to say, which of course you do, because there's so much material here and it's so significant that I'd want you to actually pack this out into more. So I say, yeah, if you maybe like wrap this up here, and maybe we could schedule part 2. Maybe we could do this on your channel, and then I can stream to my channel from your channel. I don't know, something like that. That sounds pretty good to me. But yeah, do you want to like summarize, and we can take it from there?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. So like, I'll go to the end real quick so people can like. This is the stuff that's original to Muhammad. This is it. This is all the stuff I found that's original. Everything else has previous sources attached to it.
So the straps of the anus. That's the first one you've got there. That's original. Well, I think that's a bad thing, not a good thing.
None of this is good stuff. Yeah.
God not
you
being a
have
father.
you have
Oh,
eyes being the
interesting.
leadership, the anus, God not being a father, child marriage, slaves, remarriage via intercourse with another man first. That's literally anti-Bible. The finger licking whenever you eat food, the Garkid tree. I literally can't find the Garkid tree, which I thought was very surprising. Jizya is original. Satanic verses are original. The Bismillah before specifically that is original. The Bismillah before eating is not original. That is Jewish. But then he applies the Bismillah to this, unaliving those animals and then severing of the aorta and all these errors. That's all original to him. So it's like all the stuff you don't really want to have in a system, in a religion. That's what's original. Everything else, just about everything else, is not original to Muhammad. Now he interjects occasionally some new ideas or he makes things more Islamic. So like Surah 27, for example, he makes a very Jewish story, very Jewish folklore into Islamic folklore by making him not a drunkard, not dancing, listening to music, and then makes the bird praise Allah and makes the Queen of Sheba praise Allah. So like they become Muslims instead of becoming Jews. But in the original story, the bird is a Jew. The Queen of Sheba becomes a Jew. She actually becomes the great grandmother of Nebuchadnezzar, and through Solomon. So like Solomon is the great great grandfather of Nebuchadnezzar, which then later destroys Israel, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But you
Yeah.
have all of these narrative points that make it extremely Jewish. That's all nonsense and made up that just is introduced into the Quran in Surah 27 in a more Islamic version. So he's just copying all of this material, Islamicizing it, and throwing it into his book, usually in a paraphrase form. So he always drops out details. It's always a high level view of the topic, not really like very, like all the Jewish sources and Christian sources are very detailed. The Quran is just like, yeah, this thing happened because of that thing. And, there's another thing that happened, but I don't remember it. It's a high level understanding and views of the original sources. It's a paraphrase. That's what the Quran is. The Quran is a paraphrase of Jewish, Christian, Zoroastrian, and Gnostic sources and pagan sources. Almost none of it is original to him, and this just shows that Islam is false. The dual Quran by itself can show Islam is false, but you have I have 70% of the Quran mapped out to previous sources. 70% of your book, and then the majority of the book that's not like stolen or influenced by previous sources is the biographical stuff, like Surah 33. Like that can't be stolen because it's about Muhammad and his life and his wives and the wars that he's fighting. So other than the warfare, other than his disputes with his wives, other than him gaining power and like guilt tripping his followers and like him being a cult leader, other than those passages, everything else is pretty much stolen. So you have a, like 10% or so of the Quran is original, that's not biographical and not stolen. So of that, he comes up with some ideas that are like loosely associated. But even then, I can't prove they're original, which is crazy at this point. Like they could have just been lost to history. It could have been oral tradition that was lost that we don't have originally, just didn't survive. So it could have been popular at his time, but not popular in written history. I can't actually prove that it was original. I can show that most of it was not original, but I can't prove that what is original actually is original, because there's this idea, like there's this phrase in Japanese of murder is a habit. Once you use murder to solve a problem one time, that will then start becoming your primary problem solver.
Right.
Like if I have to kill this person in order to solve, they're gonna like blackmail me or something like that. And then any obstacle you face, you start using this immoral action as you're solving these problems. So you could also say plagiarism is a habit. Once you use plagiarism once to justify your prophethood, you're going to start using it more and more and more and more until eventually your entire book is just a paraphrase of previous sources. Now, again, he's using this as justification for his prophethood. I'm a prophet because my doctrines are lining up with the Jews and Christians so well, but he doesn't know what is scripture that he's supposed to be lining up with. And he's lining up with just things that he heard on caravan trails and from rabbis and Christians and just anyone who ever talked to him, like Mary the Copt, for example, is probably where some of the Gnostic stuff is coming from. Like you have any human he's interacting with that knows something he doesn't know, he treats it as if it's true and throws it into his book, which just demonstrates that he's a false prophet and Islam is false. So
interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to arrange for a part 2 of this. Let me put both of us back on the screen. Yeah, I think ultimately this is like an incredibly powerful argument for anyone who's interested in looking at the Islamic dilemma and just expanding it to see all of the sources, including the Talmud, the Mishnah, the oral law, and how the Quran has such a weird and crazy relationship with these additional sources in a way that it somehow seems to be thinking this is what was given to Moses and therefore is true, and the Quran is therefore repeating it, which explains why the Jews know about it, because it thinks that it's scripture, it thinks that it's revelation, when evidently it isn't. I think that's really powerful stuff, and I'm really glad that we could have you on. I want to have you on again to go through the remaining parts, if that's all good with you, Chris. And where can people find you?
Defending a Lion on YouTube and most other platforms. Although everything I post on X and TikTok and Instagram is all just the stuff from YouTube, so it's not like original. But you can use your platform of choice. It was copied, yes. Yeah.
It's not
I'm
inspired,
a plagiarist of myself. No, I was actually streaming once on TikTok, and TikTok, I don't know if you ever streamed on TikTok, but it'll give you like warnings for certain things, like, oh, you said something that was abusive or bullying of certain protected groups.
Oh, I didn't know.
Or you're yeah. One of the categories it has where it flags your stream is unoriginal content. So if they think that you're stealing something, they'll flag you as unoriginal content. And I was once giving my testimony on TikTok. So I was giving my testimony of my life, how I came to Christ, and I got flagged for unoriginal content. That's
kind of like bad, but also good in a way, because it means that there's enough people with a similar testimony. Like, so you see how it's kind of a good thing?
Oh, I don't think so. I was mentioning some wild stuff I don't think any other human has ever gone through.
Yeah.
But they flagged me for unoriginal content. Yeah.
Really weird. I've never streamed on TikTok. I've joined streams on TikTok, but not streamed. But yeah, TikTok is a whole nother thing for me.
Nonsense. Man.
Maybe one day I'll join it, but the audience on TikTok is a lot more different. I don't know. I think the audience on YouTube is more, I don't know, mature, more. I don't know. There's something about it that I feel. Maybe it's just because, I don't know, younger people are on TikTok, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. But my channel is Defending a Lion. The book will be The Talmudic Dilemma. That will come out hopefully this year for Christmas. If not, it'll come out early next year. But I do have... and if you want to support my work, you can become a member on my YouTube channel. Super chats, like half of it go to YouTube and Google and Apple. So if you want to donate to me or my ministry, do it through my website or do it through memberships on my channel. But yeah. So book will be out hopefully this year, and then we're going to destroy Islam.
Man, I'm going to be praying for that book, because I can't wait to get my copy of it, man. Get it on Amazon. I'll do videos on it to promote it. That'd be really awesome stuff. I just realized we have a quick few more super chats. Hello, gents, says Paul. Some say important question. You two hold specialization in important parts of anti-Islam knowledge. Will you debate anytime soon? Yes, I go to Speaker's Corner and I debate there. Although often it is with people who are, they're new Dawa guys, because the Dawa guys that have been there for 10, 20 years, they're sort of more embarrassed to talk to me, so they won't talk to me anymore. But how about you, Chris?
So right now I'm just trying to finish the book and also keep up content on my channel and not just like ghost it for 5 months. So that's part of the reason why the book is taking so long. I might have to. We'll see. I'm
I
trying
ended
not
up
to.
doing that, so you know, I had to like,
I know.
yeah.
We'll see how it goes. But debates, I have been like doing call-in streams where Muslims can join. I've talked to a couple Muslims. But as far as like formal debates, I've never actually done one. I've discussed and I've done conversations with Muslims. I did a bunch at the mosque last weekend. But as far as like debating the Dai on YouTube or like modern day debate or any of that, I probably will do it next year, but I'm not going to this year. I'll just have way too much stuff to do. So
Nice. You're focusing on the important stuff. That's good. Glitch NZ Matri X says, "Did you use any AI tools to help you with these conclusions?" I think that's aimed at you, Chris.
I came up with the syllogism myself. I asked the AI, "Hey, do you think this is sound?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's pretty good." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So I got an AI approval that Islam is false. And then I got AI to help find sources, and I've done so much reading of the Talmud. I've used AI because like searching the Talmud it's such a big book. So I used it to search for Arabic phrases in the Talmud in Hebrew. I used it to search for specific ideas. So I've used it a lot for the background of searching, but you have to verify everything because AI hallucinates so much. So I had to verify every single source with the previous. So I've gone everything back to the original Hebrew in the original Arabic.
Nice.
So I'm doing
that's
that.
the best
Then
way of doing it.
yeah, I had some AI review like, oh, does this actually make sense? Are there any factual errors? So I've been mostly using AI for that, just fact checking. But as far as AI to help me write, not as much.
Yeah, I was very suspicious with AI completely, basically. What I used AI for when I wrote my book, The Islamic Dilemma, which you can get here, by the way, just so you guys know, in case you haven't seen it yet. And samesies. So for me, it was just like for things that were not controversial, right? So I would be like, could you bring up Surah 3, Ayah 3? And it would just tell me, okay. I was like, okay, so what translation are you using? Okay, then I'll check it with an actual copy of it. It was just stuff like that. It's like basic fact find, like things that I don't think it can hallucinate or give me an opinion on that is like wrong or controversial or anything.
Right.
Right. Yeah, because as soon as it starts, and you know what's funny though, the AI, at least with ChatGPT anyway, it tries to figure out what you're doing. It's so interesting. It's like, you keep asking for verses that are related to the Islamic dilemma. You don't happen to be doing anything about the Islamic dilemma, are you? And I was like, no. It tries to guess what you're doing. And I'm like, stop trying to do this. I don't want your opinion. I don't want you to add any of this stuff. I just want what is this verse? That kind of thing.
Right.
But he couldn't resist.
Chat dry pai tai.
Yeah, ChatGPT, indeed. But yes, I think that's a good place to end it for now. But I very much want to have you on for part 2, and then we can go through the next part of those. I think that'll be really interesting. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.